Hey everybody, it's Road to Retire. I do personal finance and I'm hoping to retire early. Pretty self-explanatory, right? So today I wanted to comment on Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. So just right off the bat, I think it's kind of trendy for a lot of like finance bros on YouTube and on TikTok and Twitter and whatnot. They kind of trash Dave Ramsey, and I don't think it's warranted at all. I mean, there's some instances where I disagree with Ramsey's, as I'll point out in this video, but none, his advice is pretty good. And I mean, if you followed his advice to a T, you're going to do fine. I mean, yes, there's some things that maybe you would like to do differently or more, suitable for your individual lifestyle. But in the grand scheme of things, I genuinely agree with what Dave Ramsey has to say. So this is definitely not going to be a bashing video at all. I agree with a huge majority of what he has to say in his 7 baby steps. But I just thought I'd give my perspective a little bit just because, I'm a person who has higher medical bills than a lot of people just because of my condition. So let's get into it. So the first baby step is baby step 1, save $1,000 for your starter emergency fund. Now, 100% I am on board with your first step should be getting an emergency fund. However, take it from someone like me who I've had a ton of medical expenses, so it is not even May yet, and I've had had to pay $8,000 just for a lot of things going on that I did not expect at all. I couldn't have foreseen it. So $1,000 honestly wouldn't have done me much good because it would have ran out before January even ended. And that kind of feeds into what Dave likes to preach a lot, which is getting out of debt, which I wholeheartedly agree with. But honestly, I had to finance like 800, I don't know if finance is the right word, but I had to go about $800 to $1,000 in medical debt just because I couldn't afford it right off the bat. And maybe if I had a better emergency fund for stuff like this, I would have been in better shape. $1,000 would not have gotten me far at all. And I would consider, what I had to do, get ultrasounds and get MRIs on my brain. I would consider that an emergency, unexpected, and I would just like to see a little bit more than $1,000. I know why he does it. It's because he kind of wants this first step to be out of the way as soon as possible. He wants you to get in a mindset of like, okay, maybe I can get rid of some old crap that I have in my house to get this money fast, realizing, materials aren't everything, and get to that emergency fund so you can have some comfort. I understand it. I'm just saying, I think maybe even $2,000 would be a little bit better, and then you have more time to refill it if something goes wrong. Baby step 2, pay off all debt except the house using the debt snowball. So what the debt snowball is in his terms is if you have, let's say, 3 credit card bills, one is for $100, one is for $1,000, and one is for $10,000. His method is pay off that $100 one as soon as possible. Then you can work on paying the $1,000 one off, and then once you finally have that paid off, then you can work on your biggest one, which would be the $10,000. It's the debt snowball, aka it starts small, winds up, and gets bigger and bigger as you go on. So paying off all debt, I am also 100% in agreement that being in debt is one of the worst things you can do. It's how you build generational, what's the opposite of wealth? Generational poorness. I personally abided by this. I was fortunate enough to get a partial scholarship to my college that I attended, so I only had about $20,000 in student loan debt when I got out, and I paid off that $20K within 2 years. I made it my life's mission. Now, part of this you also have to realize is living within your means, and I know it's reading between the lines that you can pretty much understand that, but I lived in a really crappy apartment in somebody's house that I found on Craigslist. It was $900 a month for every single utility and everything included, internet, all that stuff. So I was able to save a lot of money, even though I only made about $45,000 a year at the time. I made it my number one priority to get that student loan debt paid off immediately. I drove a really crappy car until I could afford one after paying off my student loans. And even when I got my car, which was nothing more than like a $18,000 Kia, brand new at the time, I even paid that off in 2 years. So I am a huge proponent of paying off all debt. So I completely agree with baby step 2. Baby step number 3 is saving 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. So I agree with the concept for this. However, I feel like it should be a year. You want to build a cushion. And if you're married, you and your spouse, if you both lose your jobs, you're going to be scrambling because you have to pay rent or your mortgage no matter what. And 3 to 6 months on paper, it sounds like, yeah, that's enough. I'll be able to get a job in 3 months or whatever. Until you experience that, where you get laid off and you realize, okay, well, I have 4 months that I could live off of before something happens. Well, what if in that 4-month period before you getting a job, you have a medical emergency like I had, where it's like I had to get an MRI quick, that costs thousands of dollars. All of a sudden your 3 to 6 months of emergency fund gets drained like that. So it kind of goes hand in hand with what I had to say about baby step 1. I think you need to build more cash on hand before you can move on to the next steps in your life. I understand paying down debt is very important, but I would almost put baby step 3 to baby step 1 and not even have 3. I would say almost start out with 3 to 6 months. Now, that might be a little difficult for people, might be a little too aggressive. So maybe the 3 month of expenses is more realistic, but I'm in the mentality that there's nothing wrong with having cash. Cash is king, right? I know that adage doesn't really work in today's times, but for me personally, I love having a giant cushion. And if you don't have that giant cushion, things can get dicey. Stuff like credit card debt, yes, it's very important that you should pay that off as soon as possible. But keep in mind, you can make smaller payments on that if need be. Now, the interest rates are ridiculous and it will compound over time. But at the same time, there's nothing bad's going to happen if you just pay minimum payments for a year, is what I'm saying. That's what a lot of Americans do. But I think getting that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months immediately is going to relieve a lot of stress in your life. So even if you do lose your job, sure, you might have some credit card debt, but I think it's going to be a little easier to swallow if just instead of having like $1,000 for something medical and then you can worry 3 months of expenses, I think saving that money up front is going to be a lot less stressful. But nonetheless, it's not bad advice by any means by Dave. So it's not like I completely disagree with what he's saying or anything. I would just prioritize saving up the cash first. Baby step 4 is invest 15% of your household income in retirement. So overall, I think this is good. People are going to harp on the 15%. I think the only part that bugs me about this is if you're someone who's reading these 7 steps at once and are going to follow it to a T, that maybe you're not putting any money into your retirement fund, your Roth, your 401k at all until you get to this 4th baby step, which is, I personally think, is a huge mistake. I would say at the very least, no matter what the situation is, if your job offers some kind of 401k match, you just take it up. You put the minimum amount to maximize that match that your employer has in your 401k. At that point, it's free money. I know a lot of finance bros don't like hearing that either, that 401ks are kind of, outdated and they don't really work anymore, but I highly disagree with that. So 15%. For me personally, that would be a little bit high just with my recurring expenses that I have no control of, but I completely understand it. If you're debt free besides your house, it's going to be a lot easier to save an amount like 15%. Personally, I save about 6%, and with my 401k match that I get from my employer, it ends up being a total of about 11%. And then my wife saves 12%, and with her match gets around 15 to 16 total. So our household income is doing fine in terms of 401k money. We don't have a Roth, but there's nothing wrong with Roths. I just haven't gotten around to investing in one, honestly. I have a different mentality for how I want to get to early retirement. I'd rather do it through dividend investing, but I understand the mentality here, so I don't disagree with it too much. Maybe you can, disagree on the number of 15%, or does it give off the impression of not putting in your 401k beforehand? But nonetheless, I have no issues with that, and I agree that you should absolutely save for retirement. Now, number 5 and number 6, I'm going to talk about together. So number 5 is save for your children's college fund. Number 6 is paying off your home early. So, right off the bat, there's going to be people who are like, oh, I don't want children. So obviously you can ignore the step. Don't be a dick about it. But let's just say that you are like a typical American family and you are, a husband and wife and you have 2 kids, right? So this step is saying after you make sure you're putting 15% of your household income into your retirement fund, that you should be saving for your children's college fund. And I understand the mentality behind it where, college can be very, very expensive. And, I was fortunate to get a partial scholarship, so I only had to pay 1.5 years of college. But nonetheless, I'm more of the mentality of it should be your child's responsibility to pay for it. I mean, they know what they're getting into. It should be your job as a parent to kind of teach them what college is about. Like, look, this is how expensive it's going to be. What field do you plan on going in? And, be realistic with your kid. Like, if they're failing in high school, college might not be the best route for them. But if they do go to college, pick something, have them pick a major or a focus in a field where, you are almost guaranteed a job at a college, and you don't necessarily have to be, an A+ student all your life. Just be realistic with your kid. I think that's really important to teach them. And the reason I wanted to kind of pair step 5 and step 6, because step 6 is paying off your home early. So this one kind of is more personal towards me because, I'm 32 years old, and my goal right now is to pay off the house early. So I'm putting $1,000 extra in principal to my house to try and pay it off early right now each month. And I don't have children, but I do want children. And I feel like I would be doing myself a disservice if I'm just saving for the child's fund and then I don't give myself a chance to pay off the house early. Now, I know I could do a hybrid where it's like maybe instead of putting $1,000 on top to pay the house off early, I only do $500 and then put $500 towards a college fund for my kid. But, I personally think that's the wrong way to approach it. I would rather have the house paid off early, and theoretically, I would get the house paid off before my child is even close to going to college, and then saving for that college fund becomes way more realistic. I think putting the children's college fund at 5 is a little preemptive. I would almost put that at 7, to be honest. Or maybe I don't even do it at all and I do it just have a child fund in general, not necessarily college. But maybe I do a step like have a custodial account where your kid's invested into S&P 500 or something like that, and you just contribute a little bit to that each month rather than just saying, here's your college fund. Instead of paying off the house early, I'm going to focus on the college fund. I don't necessarily agree with that step. I think a lot of people have my viewpoint where they don't necessarily agree with baby step 5. Baby step 6 on paying off your house early, I think this is really, really important. And Ramsey, to his credit, has a great calculator that I've used many, many times to see how much if you put down based on your interest rate, based on the length of your loan and the principal amount that you took the loan out on. If you paid, let's say, $20 a month extra on top, just straight to principal, how much time would you save? And it's amazing. Even on a 30-year mortgage, even as something as small as $20 extra a month can save you a year, and it saves you hundreds of dollars in interest. So I'm 100% on board with paying off your home early. Just remember how the structure of home debt works, like a mortgage loan, is that say you have a 5% interest, right? And you owe $100,000. So that 5% is being calculated on how much principal you have left to pay on that house. So what happens is those first 5 years of payments, if you're just doing minimum, a huge chunk of that is just going straight to interest, and principal is barely being touched. Because remember, that interest rate does not move, assuming you're in a fixed interest rate environment. The interest rate does not move. So your principal is very slowly going to get paid down just because, you're paying 5% in this scenario off of 100K, then maybe you have like 99,900 some, and it's just that amount. It takes a long time for it to invert where you're paying more principal than interest. So if you're paying more principal right off the bat, not only are you flat out paying the house off sooner by putting it directly into principal, but it's almost like a snowball effect there too, where you get to that inversion point where you're paying more principal than interest in your minimum payments. You get to that inversion point faster, and then it starts to snowball and get quicker and quicker. So that's why something even as minuscule as $20 a month can save almost a year's worth of interest and payments on your mortgage. So I would greatly encourage paying off your home early to be higher up on the list. And the last baby step below me is step 7, build wealth and give. I have absolutely no quarrels about this one. I 100% agree with it that, try and build up your worth as much as you possibly can. And, give. If you're in the opportunity where you can give to charities or make the community around you better, then you should do it. I, for one, am a huge proponent of does it really make sense to get into political arguments with your friends? At the end of the day, the stuff that really matters is your local community, right? You live where you live, and the direct area around you is one of the most important. So if you can give back to your local community or help build the community around you, you're really doing a better job than any national politician could do. So if you're in a position where you can give, maybe you help less fortunate families in your area, or maybe you donate materials to fill potholes or something very simple like that, you're doing a lot better for the community, and you're going to make your own living situation more bearable. So if you can do it, if you have the extra money to do it, absolutely you should. There's no reason that you shouldn't. And I know Ramsey is very Catholic, and he credits his faith for a lot of stuff in his life. So, giving to church is more his prerogative, and that's fine. I mean, you got to do what makes you happy, and hopefully you're doing a charitable donation or something that ultimately makes you happy in the long run. So hope you enjoyed my take on Dave Ramsey's baby steps. Overall I think it's a good plan. I would never I just have little nitpicks just because everyone's situation is a little different, so I wanted to give it from the situation of someone who has a pretty good amount of medical bills. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want more personal finance videos. Welcome to Road to Retire, and I hope you have a great day.